Okay, welcome back, everybody. We're going to talk a little bit more about the course syllabus as relates to the lecture and lab schedules. And then I'd also like to have us go into Blackboard where I can show you where there's certain bits of information that you're going to want to be aware of and be able to print specific stuff off and bring to lab with you each week. So I'm going to share my screen. You should be able to see now the lecture schedule in front of you. I want to again reiterate to you that all of the lecture quizzes and the 4 lecture exams are going to be given in person in lab. So I've indicated that here in red. And so any of these particular quiz dates that you see here in the second column, so we've listed the 16 weeks of the semester in the first column, so you can tell what we're doing week by week. You can also see what specific topics we're going to be covering each week and the corresponding lecture chapters in the textbook. So you can read ahead if you'd like, but we are going to adhere to this schedule as closely as we can. So for example, our second week of class, we've got our first lecture exam, our lecture quiz, excuse me, scheduled for February 3rd. That, of course, is a Wednesday. These are all Wednesdays, by the way, because that's when we're meeting face to face. We're going to be having our first lecture quiz in lab on the 3rd of February. And that particular first lecture quiz is going to cover information that we will have put on the PowerPoint and in Blackboard, and also talked about in Zoom. It's going to be chapter 1 and a good chunk of chapter 3. Won't include all of chapter 3 because we still have the rest of that second week to complete chapter 3. So my intention is to let you know how much you need to study or what you need to study for these various lecture quizzes. And so we'll probably end up talking about that on Tuesdays, I would guess. So you'll know what to expect in terms of what to study for, how much to study for that lecture quiz the next day, which would be Wednesday. Okay, so again, we've got listed here the lecture quizzes in the second column. We've got the 4 exams listed and the dates. Again, these are all going to be given in lab. The way that we do the quizzes and the exams is the material that you need to know for these different things is going to be the material that we cover up to the quiz or up to the exam. So for example, our first exam scheduled here for the 4th week on the 17th of February is going to cover chapters 1 and 3 and part of chapter 4, because we won't have gotten through all of it by the time we take that first exam. So notice it's listed here in week 4. So just a chunk of it, a part of it, will be on this first exam. The second exam on the 24th of March is going to pick up with the second half of chapter 4, but will also include 5 and 6 and 7. And perhaps part of 8. We'll see. We'll talk more about that as we get closer. But you won't have to worry about chapters 1 or 3 on the second exam. Okay, in other words, the material is not cumulative. It's just going to test you over material since the preceding exam or the preceding quiz. So the quiz on the 24th of February is not going to have anything in it on chapter 1, because we've already tested you on that on the first quiz. So again, we'll kind of fine tune that process, and you'll get a better sense of how that works as you proceed through the semester. So don't want you to worry about that right now, but that's kind of how we're going to be doing those lecture quizzes and those lecture exams. Going to be given in lab, but here is the timetable, what we're going to be covering week by week. Okay, so that's lecture. Let's go to our last page of the syllabus. This is the tentative lab schedule. Again, lab is in room 204 from 9 to 11:45. Here we are, week by week, going through the 16 weeks of the semester. Here we have the topics corresponding to the lab exercises that we're doing each week. So you would be best served to try to look over those exercises before you come into lab that Wednesday, and you know what we're doing because you have the schedule right here in front of you. What I've tried to do as best I can is to dovetail the topics that we cover in lecture with those that we cover in lab. In other words, what I try to do before we talk about, say, tissues in lab, that we've had a chance to talk about them already in lecture. I think it's much easier for you to have heard it first in lecture and then shortly afterwards in lab. I think that helps to cement the material. So I really spend a lot of time and effort in trying to dovetail the lecture and the lab. I have taught courses, I have taught labs at other schools and other campuses where, for example, let's say the heart is covered in lab next week, the heart anatomy, the heart physiology, and then it's discussed in lecture 2 weeks later. I think that is a bad way to do it. I really, again, make an effort to try to have you hear it first in lecture and then lab. So again, back to the lab schedule. This second column is listing the lab quizzes indicated here by the red asterisks that I've highlighted sort of in green. Okay, so again, don't confuse lecture quizzes with lab quizzes. The red asterisk highlighted in green are the lab quizzes that test your knowledge over the stuff we've been studying in lab. So for example, our first lab quiz on February 3rd is going to cover, for the most part, exercise 2, body organization and terminology. I reserve the right to ask you a general sort of question on the exercises the day of the quiz, the lab quiz, to see if you have read ahead and are prepared for lab. So this first lab quiz on the 3rd, the majority of it is going to be over chapter or exercise 2, but I could ask you something about the handout related to the rat dissection, or a general question related to exercise 4, which is the microscope exercise, just to see if you've been looking ahead. So just be aware of that. Now, note also here that I've indicated to you that we have our first lecture quiz also on the 3rd. Okay, so you've got 2 quizzes that day. You've got a lecture quiz and you've got a lab quiz. And that's the case for several of these labs. On the 3rd of February, on the 10th, we have that. Down here on the 17th of March, we've got 2. And again, on the 21st of April, there's both a lecture quiz and a lab quiz. There will be some lab dates where we have just a lab quiz, like on the 14th of April or on the 10th of March. And there'll be some lab meetings when we don't have a lab quiz, but we have a lecture quiz, like on the 3rd of March or on the 7th of April. So I've tried to color code this in green and in yellow to help simplify in your mind what's going on in terms of evaluations, quizzes, and so forth each week. So I know at first this is a little confusing, but as we work through it, as you get comfortable with the process and how it's been organized, I think we'll be fine. Okay, so that's pretty much the remaining part of the course syllabus. What I'd like to do next is to have us look in the Blackboard course shell. So I'm going to now share the, let me see here. All right, now you see the Blackboard course shell, I hope. So here in the left-hand column, I just want to point out the fact that we have a couple important things. Here is the Zoom link. So with regard to the review session or the Wednesday afternoon lecture Zoom from 1:15 to 2:30, if you click on that, it should take you right into my Zoom room. So easy access. To access the Zoom room, go to the Blackboard course shell. In fact, what I'm going to do is I am going to switch this over to student view because some of the stuff that is here is instructor material. So I'm going to kind of show you what you're going to see. So here's what you're going to see when you pull it up in your on your computer. Here's the Zoom link, as I mentioned before. Let's go to content next. And what I've done is I posted all of the course content in the lecture course shell. In other words, you have both the lecture and the lab course shells, don't you, in Blackboard? I have put nothing in the lab course shell. Everything is in the lecture course shell, lecture and lab material. So just be aware of that. Here is the course syllabus that we've spent some time talking about. This is the master course syllabus, which you can look over if you want. It's something we have to put in all of our Blackboard course shells. It's just sort of the overall institutional master syllabus, if you will, for A&P 1. It's going to look very similar to what I've put in the course syllabus. Here are the Zoom meetings and Zoom lectures. So this particular lecture is going to be in that folder. So any of the Zoom lectures you can access in this folder. The various chapter lectures, that's where you go to find them. Let's just click on this real quick. And what I've got here are the two lectures, one for chapter 1 and one for chapter 3, which is what we're going to be getting into our first week of the semester. So you should begin to watch these as soon as possible and start referencing the information as presented in the whole Human and A&P textbook, which you should have. These will be up and available for you to begin to look at. I'll post these week by week. I'll be adding to this listing as time goes on, all the chapters. I could put all of them up now, I suppose, if you wanted. I just thought rather than put them all up in one fell swoop, I would just put them up as we kind of began to work through the semester. So again, those are the Zoom recordings for lectures and for this sort of Zoom I'm doing now for the introduction of the course. Here are the PowerPoints. I think I've got, again, chapter 1 and chapter 3. Here's chapter 2. Remember I said earlier in the previous Zoom presentation I did that you have a 30-point chemistry exam coming up in February. A 30 multiple choice chemistry exam, and that you would be having to go into chapter 2 and begin preparing for that yourself, because I wasn't going to put together a Zoom lecture on chapter 2. Now, again, we can certainly talk about that. We can discuss it during the review or even during our Wednesday Zoom class. That's perfectly fine. But you're not going to see a Zoom lecture on chapter 2. But I have a PowerPoint that can kind of walk you through the major parts of the chapter, but you should certainly read the chapter. And as I'll talk about in a few moments, there's some study objectives that will help guide you in not only that chapter, but any of the chapters we're going to cover this semester. So here are the PowerPoints. The Zoom lectures that I post are going to basically be me narrating the PowerPoints as well, so you can kind of access them in both places. But if you want to see just the PowerPoint, you can come to this folder in the content. Here's the study objectives I was mentioning just a moment ago. These are objectives that I have put together many years ago on all of the chapters related to Bio 2510. Okay, so here's chapter 1. Here's chapter 2 that I was referring to a little bit earlier that you're responsible for preparing for that chemistry exam. I think these objectives can help provide a framework for you to work through each chapter. In other words, as you're reading it, you should be able to answer these questions and know what's being described in those various objectives. They're not the be all and end all. They're not covering every single topic in minute detail. But I think they provide a good framework. As I said earlier, students tell me that as they prepare for the quizzes and prepare for the lecture exams, they utilize these study objectives. They sort of put together a study packet, if you will, and these objectives help guide them in putting that sort of together. So they are there for you to use. I've listed all of the chapters for the entire semester. So they're all here for you. And again, you can make use of them as you see fit. Okay. There are some lecture outlines which you can take a look at. If you think they would be helpful for you, you're welcome to use those. The same applies to the study outlines and answers. Let me just go to that real quick. There are basically 2 files for each chapter. Let's take a look at the chemistry chapter, for example, and look at the attached file here for the student study outline. I'm going to pull that up. It's a Word document. And as you can see, it begins with a series of statements. Matter is blank. Compounds are blank. 6 examples of bulk elements are blank. And so on and so forth. These are sort of like definitions, aren't they? Electrons carry a blank charge. Electrons are located blank. So if you would like to use these and fill these out after you've studied, say, the lecture notes or the lecture presentation that I've given, the lesson, you can do that. Now, to check your answers, all you've got to do is to go to that second file, which is Chapter 2 answers. So let's click on that. We'll pull that up. And of course, what you're going to see are the answers that should have gone in those blanks, right? Compounds are blank. 6 examples of bulk elements are carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, sulfur, phosphorus. Electrons are found orbiting the nucleus. Protons carry a positive charge, and so on and so forth. So all of those blanks, if you will, that you saw in the previous Word document, they are here in the quote-unquote answers to that same chapter. So again, you can use these as you see fit. Totally up to you whether you want to utilize those study objectives or study outlines, but they're there if you would like them. Okay, let's go to this file that I've listed here, stuff to copy and bring to lab each week. I put this in red to draw your eye to it. This is that folder that has all of the various exercises that we're going to be covering in lab this semester, in addition to some unlabeled diagrams in different exercises. So let's not necessarily talk about those right now, but for example, you're going to be getting into the body organization and terminology exercise number 2 in lab this first week. And if we click on this, it's going to reference a list of terms here that relate to the torso model. Now, when we get together on Wednesday in class, it won't be until the second week. So you won't be able to actually do this the first week because we're doing this again remotely. So I guess I probably should have not even put this up here because we're not going to be able to utilize the torso model. But had we met that day, we would have utilized the torso model and we would have identified these various structures, and I would have asked you to put a number next to its location on the actual model. What this is asking you to do in these second blanks, these longer blanks, is to indicate what organ system do these various structures belong to. And that is something that you can do without having the torso model in front of you. Okay, so for example, if I said esophagus, hopefully you would know that that's in the digestive system. Or if you saw heart, you'd list that in the cardiovascular system. Or if you saw lung, you list that in the respiratory system. Okay, so while we can't fill in the numbers that correspond to the identification of these structures on the torso model, we can begin to link the structure with a particular organ system, and that's something that you should do in preparation for that first lab quiz the second week. So let me bring us back again to the let me bring us back to the Blackboard course shell. Stuff to copy and bring to lab each week. So you see these different exercise listings. These are the things that I want you to bring when we cover exercise 11 in lab or 12 in lab or whatever the exercise might be. These are the things that you need to print off. I would suggest doing a 3-hole punch, putting it into a binder, and then you've got it. So bring it to lab. These are all the exercises. Now there are a few things here like the video, which obviously you can't run off. But when we get to the neuromuscular junction model, when we cover exercise 19, this particular video does a nice job explaining that model. So that's why I put it in here. Okay. So any Word documents, any diagrams, any of those sorts of things that pertain to these various exercises, I would like you to run off and bring with you. You cannot run off a video, obviously, but all these other documents you can. Exercise 45 isn't just a video. There are some other Word documents here that again, I want you to print off and bring with you. So that is the folder that you want to be spending some time exploring and printing off in the next week. In terms of writing the research paper, this is a nice little Word document that has some guidelines to that. Heart diagram and anatomy dissection videos. When we get to that particular part of the lab, you're going to want to take a look at this. There is an article that we will talk a little bit about in lecture when we get into the blood chapter, I believe it is. So there's a couple little articles here that relate to the course. This is not so much the lab. That's obviously in here, but you might spend some time just kind of looking through these and be familiar with what's here. There's some nice A&P videos that I really encourage you to spend some time checking out. Some really, really cool, fun videos. These Gunther von Hagen's videos are pretty interesting. Just click on one sometime and watch it. This is really pretty amazing stuff. So you can check that out. And then the last thing I'll mention here are the practice websites. Sometimes it's nice to go to another site to assist you in learning about these various topics we're going to be talking about in lecture and in lab. And this particular YouTube channel has some super great short videos on all aspects of anatomy and physiology, whether it's A&P 1 or 2. It's excellent. So I would highly encourage you to check out that particular YouTube link and bookmark it, because there's some excellent stuff there. These are some other websites that have some practice quizzes and practice practicals that you can take. As you come across any other really interesting, cool sites related to A&P, please pass those on to me, and I'll simply add that on, and we'll begin to build this folder, this file a little bit more. There's just so darn much out there, some good stuff. So I wanted to at least make you aware of what was there. Okay. I think that covers most of the information that I was going to describe as it relates to Blackboard. All right. Well, I'm sure there's something I'm forgetting, but I will be sure to talk to you more about this when we get together on Wednesday during our Zoom session. By the way, we'll also be meeting Tuesday. There won't be a whole lot to review in the review session, but I know that's scheduled for 11:30 to 12:20. So I would encourage you, if you're in the review, signed up for the review session, that we still plan to Zoom. If nothing else, we'll get comfortable with connecting, into the Zoom room, and we can kind of see each other and that kind of thing. And we can, of course, talk more about any questions you might have related to the syllabus or the course. So I will see, hopefully, some of you on Tuesday in the review session. And if not, I'll see the rest of you guys in the Wednesday 1:15 to 2:30 lecture Zoom. Remember, we won't have lab this coming Wednesday. Otherwise, I'd see you before then, but we don't have lab this Wednesday. So I won't see you physically until a week from Wednesday. Okay, hope that all made sense.